Welcome, everybody. Hello. Welcome to what will be an exciting adventure. I'm so excited to do this with my brother from the same mother and father. Love it. Mumbi, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, brother. And it's good to be here with you because this has definitely been a long time coming and it's going to be a fantastic little project.
So, welcome all of you to the Impact Space. This is going to be a podcast in which we discuss anything and everything football and youth development, and sometimes even the pro game. But just basically where Mumbi and I, who have devoted our lives to this sport, you can say, just speak on not just our experiences, but also just learning and growing within the game. Right. This is a podcast that's I think will be unique because of the focus on you, the player, especially the young players out there who are growing within the game. Right. This is all about becoming within the game. Right. Becoming your own person, your authentic self, your best self within this beautiful game. And we're going to have some amazing guests. We're going to touch on a wide range of topics. Some may be difficult to talk about as well, maybe even some controversial ones, but some important ones. And what's really special, what we look forward to, Mumbi and I, in terms of planning this, we want to make sure we get the youth voice to help us create this content. So we will be sending out definitely topics or real experiences that you all are going through that you want us to touch upon or provide a guest with and provide resources for. So that's what this space is for. Super excited. Maybe we've been talking about this for a long time, man, and I'm super pumped to get this process rolling with you, man.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, man. And it's time. So let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's do it. So for today's for the very first episode, what we sort of wanted to talk about was basically the umbrella question is how to determine quality, right? What is quality? And really within a football lens, what is a quality session in terms of the player? What do make a distinction here between what the young player thinks is quality and what they want out of a session, and then the coaching hat as well. We can touch on that. Like what is quality coaching? What is quality teaching? That is something that you can say as a society we struggle with. So yeah, what are your thoughts so far? Like or initially, what is quality?
When I was a youth player, I would say that my focus at training was definitely the scrimmage at the end. I always wanted to play. So when I see players going through sessions now, I'm thinking in my mind, are they having fun? Are they playing enough? And I think that kids have various ideas of what fun is. And maybe you can speak to this more, but for me, it was playing. So for young players, when I watch a session, I'm looking to see how much are they playing, because ultimately that for me was what was most fun. But I also don't know, what kids are looking for in a session. Do they want more drills because that's what gives them enjoyment? Does it help them, apply those skills in a game? I don't know. So that's something that varies from place to place. But what do you think about that?
In terms of what the kids want?
Yeah.
So the research would suggest uh, that kids do sports because they want to be with their friends, right? And they want to, of course, have fun. They want to, what does that mean? It can be somewhat different for every kid depending on their age and stage of development, the
Mm-hmm.
level, of competence that they have within that given sport. But overall, it's I want to enjoy doing this with people that I rock with, right? With my tribe in a way,
Yeah.
right? So and that's why, yeah, this is what kids want. I mean, that's a simple answer, but I think it's very clear. The evidence when you ask a bunch of kids, hey, why do you do this? Because my friends are here and it's fun. This is
Yeah.
what this is fun.
Yeah. I was
This
talking
is
to a
what
player about
kids
that the
want
other
to
night.
enjoy.
Yeah. We were just discussing the idea of, hey, why do you play? And literally, the first two things out of his mouth is because one, the game is fun, and two, because my friends are there. So, absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And if we were to take a larger sample size, I think we'd find similar answers. So that's clear for sure. I think
Yeah.
across the board.
Now, what is it now when coaches are designing their sessions and thinking about their philosophies, or sorry, their clubs, yeah, philosophy and curriculum and teaching and all that, all these buzzwords. Uh, what do you think they determine to be quality?
Well, everyone's got their own individual lens. Some coaches are probably influenced a bit more by a game model or a methodology from a club than others, right? So some clubs have a clear game model or idea of how they want the game to be coached and taught to the kids. Other clubs maybe not so much. So then coaches have to rely on, their own ideas to teach. But yeah, it really depends on the individual. I don't know what you think about that, but every club is going to do things different. So I would say that the coaches that have to rely on themselves more, that's maybe going to be a bit more of a challenge than the coaches that are kind of given a framework. And sometimes it actually can be the opposite. That coaches that have a framework may struggle with it if they don't agree. But it varies from person to person. I would say.
When you say given a framework, you're talking about the club having a clearly defined way of teaching.
Yes. Yeah.
You think that's helpful or no for the
Yeah,
coaches?
it can be. It can be if they buy into it, if they agree with it. So I might be a coach that says, I don't really like that approach, or that approach doesn't do it for me because I was taught differently. It doesn't resonate with me. So if I don't agree with it, it's going to be really hard for me to teach it. Right. And how do you teach something that you don't like or that you don't agree with? That would be really, really hard for anyone. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, as a society, we struggle on this point, right? Um, in terms of determining what is good teaching. And even like if we step outside of the football pitch, right, and just even think about classroom teachers, um, like how so many of them, I'm sure, would resonate with this sentiment of feeling underappreciated, and people not really realizing what it is that they do. They know that their jobs are hard. We kind of intuitively know, but when people talk about, oh, teachers' jobs are hard, they're thinking of it from the standpoint of all of the behavioral issues that they're dealing with. Of course, right? Like, oh, you have a bunch of these kids, but which is true. Um, but it's also not just that. And this is why I think it's difficult for people to, unless we dive into it, this is why kind of what we're doing in this discussion. It's difficult for people to really dissect and determine what is good teaching if they just stay surface level because it's so meta, right? Because here's the thing is, as a coach, you're being judged on, or when we judge coaches, we're not judging them on necessarily something that they do, right? In terms of the sport. You're judging them on their ability to help others to do the thing, right? To play the sport because we're not
Mm.
kicking the ball. And so that can be then when we step back and think about what the skills you need to have, and refine and the reflection that needs to take place, it's a harder thing, you know? So I like and you and I can't candidly, even before this call, right? We talk often, right? We're brothers, so we talk a lot, and we're in the same profession, both coaches. That reflection piece is really hard, right? That reflection piece is really hard because even if you think I'm right in this situation, on some level, the reality of being a coach is it doesn't matter so much if you are right. It matters what your kids are able to, how you're able to guide your kids, if that makes sense. Yeah, anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right and wrong are at times are oftentimes subjective. So yeah, like do the kids walk away from a session and have they had fun? Have they enjoyed themselves? Maybe did they learn something? Like it's gonna depend from case to case. But for me, I think that I would first and foremost agree that it's very difficult to ask yourself these questions sometimes because maybe you find out I didn't do enough to create a quality session, or there are some things I don't know. That can be a scary thing to navigate, whether you're a new coach or whether you've been coaching for a while, right? Like that can be a very daunting thing to kind of question yourself, and then to maybe even pivot and change your lens, if you will. So yeah, it's a very difficult thing, but that doesn't just apply to coaching, right? That applies to almost anything in life, right? When you've thought about something a certain way, and someone says, "Hey, have you thought about doing it this way instead?" We might be like, "Whoa, I would never do it that way," without even stopping to think and reflect that maybe that way that's being presented might have some positive aspects to it, not just for the kids you work with, but also for your personal development.
Yeah, no, I respect that. In what would you say would be like a practical example of where a lot of coaches might stumble in terms of being quality for the kids?
Yeah, actually, there's a really good one I just thought of, and it's something that's been going on for a while in many places. But the situation where a coach might see a session, for example, maybe on YouTube, that's a pro session, and they, oh, I really like that exercise. I'm going to try that in my session with my kids, not knowing that there's a reason and there's a greater context behind that session you saw. So, whatever coach it was, whether it was Pep or Ancelotti or whoever, there's a reason that session was done on that day at that time, right? And if I just say, hey, I'm going to plug that exercise into my session, and then I get frustrated because my kids struggle with it, they can't do it, I have to examine myself. And so that's something that I've seen quite a bit is, oh, I like that session, or I like that what I saw. But if it's not put in its proper context, then yeah, you're not going to get the right outcomes from it. So that's something that I would say is an issue sometimes.
So copy and paste basically doesn't
Copy and
work.
paste. Yeah. Because you have to be in a certain environment to make something work sometimes, right? So I've seen it sometimes with either passing patterns or with finishing drills or patterns. And I as a coach get caught up in, oh, it looks so nice and there's all these different pieces. This looks great. But then in application, my 11-year-olds might not be there yet. My 12-year-olds might not be there yet. And maybe I'm asking them to stand in a line for a really long time, or I'm asking them to remember exactly where to pass the ball in like a 5, 6+ pass sequence, right? So it may be difficult for them to grasp it. Right? They may not be there. And I have to accept that and know that maybe I have to make what I'm doing a little bit more simple for them. I have to meet them where they are, you know?
Okay, so on that point, it seems like that's like a good bullet. Like if we want to create, you and I both believe in the power of threes, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and because of the simplicity and clarity of that, but like that seems like a good pillar for all coaches, right? Meeting the kids where they're at, which simply
100%.
which simply means your starting point as a coach or at any club or whatever starting point should be the player.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the players?
Yeah.
Yeah, who's in front of me?
Yeah, who are the players? Who are the people? Right? Where are they coming from? You got to understand a little bit about them and maybe their families, and that gives you the ability to connect with them a little bit better. Which for me is just as important as coaching the player. It's reaching and connecting with the person that I think is really really valuable.
If that's the starting point, then what's next? So we can say this there has to be an element of we know that these are the people we're serving,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's got to be the conviction about the way in which your own methodology, or not even methodology, your mission for as an individual. But obviously, I like what you said about individual coaches have to buy into what the ethos is of whatever the organization they're working with,
Hmm.
right? Because if there's a clash there, it's difficult to do the job,
It
right?
is, yeah.
But then there's got to be a conviction there that you're doing it the right way for the right reasons, that you're serving the people.
Hmm.
Because if you're not convinced, why would they be
Hmm.
convinced,
Yeah.
right? So
Hmm.
would it be fair to say that conviction is, if we had to bullet point three things that coaches should, coaches or even players listening to this, like, what is good teaching? What elements do all good teachers, all coaches, of course, I'm using teaching and coaching interchangeably, but soccer coaches, football coaches, like the conviction has to be there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Conviction has to be there. You have to
Hmm.
believe what you're doing before you can ever get someone else to run. Because again, the football coaches, we're not doing the thing. We're trying to
Hmm.
get other people to do the thing. And this is
Yeah.
why coaching and playing are so different, right?
Yeah.
What
Very
would you
different.
say would be the next thing?
Well, in another conversation we had, we spoke about the idea of clarity, and so for me, clarity in terms of, for example, if we just talk about the soccer teaching, why are you doing something, or why have you set up a session the way that you have? I think it's really important to be clear. You might be working with players that are struggling with receiving a ball, controlling a ball, even just handling a ball as an individual player, like maybe dribbling. Be clear: is your setup, is the session helping them to dribble effectively, right? So in a situation where they're up against an opponent, are they able to navigate that situation? So I need to create a session that's clear, that helps them to do that, right? And I think that yeah, clarity has to be there in terms of now that last step. Okay, now I'm creating exercises. Now I'm creating an entire session plan. What is it that I want the players to take away from it? And are they doing that exact thing or things in the session?
Yeah, no, for sure. I like that.
What do you think? Do you think clarity makes sense to you?
Yeah, well, a couple of things I just wrote down was, there's got to be clarity of so if we say conviction of ideas and of sort of the overall mission, then to me the next thing would be the clarity of the language
Mm-hmm.
filling that mission in making those ideas real, making them practical. Um, and the language, like, we use language, it's not just
The
words.
words, yeah, yeah, it's deeper
It's
than that.
Yeah, it's also activities. It's
Mm-hmm.
everything. It's body language. It's the way we carry ourselves. Essentially, whatever behaviors. It's the behaviors. It's the words, like I said. But also even the training exercises. Those all need to be clear enough, and they need to be related to the mission,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or related to the why.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because if they're not, then you you're not actually training your why or fulfilling that.
Mm-hmm.
But also, this is what's interesting. So even when we talk about like the actual exercises,
Which is the last step. That this is a funny thing, real quick.
yeah,
Just side point that this is the last thing we talked about, and I think sometimes that process is actually flipped. Sometimes the first thing coaches worry about is, oh, what exercises am I going to do? What games
100%,
am I going to do? But
absolutely.
but the problem is if I don't have a process that shows me the bigger picture first,
Yep.
then how do I then narrow it down and say, oh, now here are the games that I want to work on? You have to funnel it, right? So
Yep.
just wanted to put that in there because I think sometimes coaches are first concerned with, oh, this is what I have to do for the session. But no, you have to think again, who are you serving? Why? What's the greater purpose or mission? And
Yeah,
then now I can start to worry about, okay, how am I going to teach them specifically?
yeah. In the context of, depending on age and stage of development, the
Yeah.
context of what this training session fits in, it's all stuff that you've mapped out
Mhm.
before. Absolutely, 100%. And
Yeah.
especially when this is what helps you as a coach when rather than coming up with 50 different exercises, right? And having this catalog of exercises, you might even have, just put a number on it, but you can even cut that in, not even just half. You can have 10 or 15 things, like really exercises that you constructed, but you play with the different constraints.
Hmm.
You play with the size of the field, you play with obviously the numbers, you play with the shape of the field, you play with maybe some rules. Certainly, you play with the time, right? Because time is a constraint. Space and time are the constants, they're the universal constraints of this game.
Hmm.
All players everywhere have to deal with them. And the clarity of an exercise is so important because the one thing players hate, and you know this, right? As a player, we've both experienced this. The one thing players hate is getting into a session and having an exercise that's so complex and so confusing that you don't even know what the scoring mechanism is, for example. Like, wait, hang on a minute. How do you
Yeah.
score? You score like that, but then, okay, but what if this happens and all that? It's the
Yeah.
worst, and it's the worst is in
It could
part
derail
because
a session.
it can derail a session because and it
Yeah.
can take the joy out of it too because obviously you want to compete, you want to win, and the simpler it is, the more your brain can then be attuned to the minute details that are going to help you reach
Hmm.
peak performance or gain an advantage and try to beat players. And rather
Yeah.
than thinking, oh, am I doing this right? Am I following this constraint properly or this rule or this whatever? So, because at the end of the day, football is a simple sport, right? But so the more we as coaches sort of confuse and have exercises that don't that are further away from the reality of the game,
Hmm.
the harder it is for the players to sort of engage their full selves.
Yeah, and the one thing I was going to add about that too is sometimes it's just a question of us removing our ego from it. And what I mean by that is that again, sometimes we look at those YouTube videos wherever they might be, and we see a setup with 100 cones, and we think, oh, I have to use 100 cones. But will my 10-year-olds, will my 11-year-olds understand why I have 100 cones on the field? And if I have to take 10, 15 minutes to explain it, which sometimes can happen, that if I'm standing there and we're talking for over even 2 minutes, I'm going to lose my players. Even, regardless of age and stage, there's a certain point where people are tuning you out. And
Yeah.
now we just spent 10, 15 minutes, and that session, that time of that session is lost. Right. And now imagine now I send them to go do that exercise or whatever, and they don't get it. And now I've wasted another 5, 10 minutes trying to stop it and change. No, you got to do this, you got to do that. And now 30 minutes of the session is gone, and maybe it's a 90-minute session. That's a third of the session gone because I wanted to create something that was more so for me than it was for the players.
Yeah. And you only see those players maybe let's say twice a week,
Yeah.
maybe once on the weekend, or even three times a week. But it's like that those training hours they dwindle fast.
Hmm.
And in terms of actual time on task,
Yeah.
it may
Gameplay.
not be
Yeah.
it may not be as much as a lot of coaches think. And that takes reflection and it takes mentorship. Of
Hmm.
course, there are a lot of coaches, right, who unfortunately don't have the same resources, right, and don't have access to certain things. But it's also, I think, just keeping track for you. One thing that I love about the mentors I've had that I have and being able to go through a coaching journey is once you understand that your job is to create an environment and then step back and observe, it changes everything because then the time on task is much greater because you're not stepping in as much with these artificial interventions that are really based on your inability to plan properly as a coach. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And just these what I mean by artificial intervention is you're stepping in because you feel like you have to or to get some, already predetermined coaching point across. When maybe your players don't need that. Maybe the
Hmm.
game is showing you that your players need you can fill in a different gap than maybe you thought. But you're open to that as a coach because what you've planned enough to allow for the process of learning to take place.
Hmm.
So, no, man, that's awesome. I think So it seems like we came to some sort of conclusions, right? Like
Yeah.
players want to have fun. They want to
Hmm.
play with their friends. Of course, as they grow and they develop their competence in the sport, they want to also improve, and so that's what they want.
Mm.
Uh, and coaches, they have to reflect, right? We have conviction, we have clarity. What do you think a third thing would be? We kind of spoke about this before, and I think we have the same word in mind, but conviction, clarity. Do you remember the last one we spoke about?
Authenticity.
Authenticity. Authenticity. Why do you think that's important?
For several reasons. I think that first and foremost,
But also, what does it mean? Sorry, like what does it mean to you? Like why do we
yeah,
say
to be authentic, to be real, to be yourself. You know, it's really hard to convince someone of anything if the perception is that you are like acting or it's a front of some kind, right? And I think, for example, I think this is a popular saying that young kids and older people will pick that up and they're pretty honest. They'll tell you, right? But yeah, kids want to know that they're with someone, they're spending time with someone, they're being guided by someone that is real, that is genuine. So I think that it's important in terms of connecting with the players, that you are genuine, that you are yourself. Whether that's just the way you talk to the kids, the way you interact with them, the way you interact with their families. Like I think that stuff is really, really important, and it builds a certain level of trust. And it builds a certain level of buy-in that I think you can't fake. At a certain level, people will figure out like, oh, this coach, this person, they're they're not trying, or they don't want the best for us, or whatever it is, right? So I think it's really, really important, for the environment, that you're authentic, that you're real.
Yeah, I was at I think I told you I gave a coaching clinic, or we did a coaching workshop, I should say, in Arizona with a group of coaches that I work with. We watched the new soccer, and I one of the clips I showed him a clip of Zinedine Zidane, right? My playing idol, uh, when I was younger, and the first time he introduced himself to the Real Madrid players in the locker room. It's an amazing video. You've seen it.
Yep. Yeah.
And
Amazing.
what comes through is the how he like captivated the players, just his presence, because he's Zidane and he moves in that, like he just moves that way. And I've
Yeah.
talked to people who've met him, and it's like in whatever space he's in, that's what he's like. Because of course of what he achieved as a player, but also just as his personality, and he just carries that much respect um, from people. And I showed that to them to point out that as coaches, something we don't reflect on enough, I think, is of course we judge players very quickly, right? In some respects, especially like in a tryout setting where maybe we don't have a lot of time, and we got to make snap decisions, or relatively quick decisions about where people should fall in the pecking order on whatever team. Okay, but then what we don't reflect on enough is players also make up their minds or make judgments about coaches, and that process also can happen very quickly. The first few interactions, right? Certainly a
Hmm.
conversation, definitely an intervention that you make, how you make it, right? When you make it, how you make it, and whether it's quality, whatever. Like all these things impact a player's perception of you. The
Hmm.
same with parents, right?
Yeah.
We had a call about this, and just you and I spoke about this. We speak about these things on a deep level, and it's like as coaches, we have to reflect on, okay, somebody else's subjective perception. And when I say subjective, I don't mean it's invalid because it's subjective. I just mean it's personal to them, and it's subjective because it contains the way they view the world, all the things that
Mm.
I touch about their being. But their perception of me matters in a sense, right? It impacts a little bit of what I do. So, excuse me. So that being said, I have to own that and be really intentional slash authentic about the way that I interact. And I put out the Zidane video, going back to that video, the importance there wasn't to show people, okay, you're going to step into a team and have this kind of aura, because only a few people can have that. But my point let me ask you, do you think Zidane knows that that's the impression that he gives off to his players?
He's a very smart guy, so I would say yes.
He knows. He knows.
Yeah.
And in the video, it's
Yeah.
beautiful because you see guys like Tony Cruz, right? They shake Zidane's hand, and then they're just like, they look at their teammates like, oh my God, dude, it's Zidane. Like these dudes are giddy. We are not all Zidanes. So what does authenticity look like for us? It means reflecting on what you're good at and how you present, and
You don't have to be somebody else.
you don't have to be somebody else, and that's the beautiful thing. I showed them that clip because it wasn't like, hey, we all have to be Zidane. We can't. That's impossible. But be you. And kids, and the point, this is the deeper point. I know you relate to this, and I'd love your thoughts on this. The beautiful thing is it actually doesn't matter whether you're Zidane or not in terms of that level of player.
Mm-hmm.
Because what really matters when it comes down to it is the kids will respect your ability to see them, right? Your ability to guide them. And obviously your ability to construct an environment in which they feel safe, they have joy, right? It's fun, and they're developing skills, they're being challenged. So anyway, I don't know what you want to add to that, man.
Ah, man, you hit it on the head. It's perfect. Yeah.
Conviction, clarity, authenticity. Let me ask you, what about the pro level? So if we look at coaches, like, because the umbrella question that we're sort of diving into on this initial podcast is, how do you determine quality? And of course, when it comes to the pro level, people have a range of opinions about coaches. Of course, we know, especially the the preeminent coaches, the prominent coaches in the game get a lot of flack sometimes, a lot of praise sometimes. Sometimes it's warranted, sometimes it's not. But yeah, your thoughts on sort of at the top level, lessons we can take or examples that you have of.
Yeah, I think it really always depends on the individual's lens in terms of what they see, what they think, what they feel is quality. So if I say, for example, that winning is quality, okay, I can have that lens. So then there's only certain coaches that are going to fit that, right? Anywhere. Not every coach can win, whether that's, individual games or whether it's a cup competition or whether it's a league competition, right? If I say that it's aesthetic, well, what aesthetic do you want? What aesthetic do you like? I can say that I like a hybrid approach. So maybe I go watch Ancelotti. His teams might do one thing one day, they might do another thing the other day. I can say that I, really like a Pep, where it's very, very clear that his team is a possession-oriented team, and that's their structure. I might also say I like a Simeone, who's got a very, very defensive approach first. But one of the things that I love is that no matter which coach or coaches you gravitate towards, whatever teams you want to watch, quality for me is that these coaches can get their teams to buy into that idea that they have. And this is why, for me, one of the best examples of that is Diego Simeone. And I know that sounds funny for people that know you and I, because they would probably raise their eyebrows and say, you guys, that's not the style or aesthetic that you guys love and always talk about. But it really, really is remarkable. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that. But for me, when I watch his teams, it's so clear that these guys would live and die by his principles and by what he wants for the team and for the club. When I watch them run together and defend together, it's really, really inspiring. And it's at the end of the day amazing. And then at the end of the day, you can also say effective, right? Is quality effectiveness? Maybe it is, because it wins them games. It's won them trophies. So again, everyone has a different lens, but I love that example of Diego Simeone and Atletico Madrid.
Well, in terms of what the three things that we labeled that are important for coaches, the conviction, the clarity, the authenticity, Simeone checks all those boxes.
He does,
And
100%.
the point is that we're making though too about looking at the top level is you don't get to be at that level and with any of these teams if you don't tick those boxes, right? You have to have the conviction about your ideas and whatever, or just the way you are,
Mm-hmm.
the way you present, the way you can inspire others. You have to be clear in your approach, right? And also, I would add to the clarity piece, right? We talk about the language being clear, but this is also like there's got to be quality, right? So in
Yeah.
terms of like clarity isn't just clarity is the way we're thinking about it is it's not just expressing something so that's easy so that other people can understand it. It's also expressing the right thing so other people can understand it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
clarity isn't, oh, I present this principle to you within the game, but that's not really a principle or that doesn't actually fit the game. The game doesn't operate like that. No, no, that's a lack of clarity. It's a lack of clarity from the coach about what the game requires, right? So this clarity also adds. I just want to make sure we're clear on that. Like it has a qualitative element, right? There has to be a level of competence for you to be clear. And then the
Mm-hmm.
authenticity, yeah, like so Simeone, when he does anything he does on the sideline, right? Pumping up the crowd, fist bumping and grabbing his privates, whatever he does, it is him. He's done it since he was a player,
Yeah.
right? The fact that he played for the club. We talk about knowing. We spoke about like knowing who the players are, or knowing who you're working, the organization you're working within, or knowing the people. He knows the people, right? He
Mm-hmm.
knows the club, and I do think that's a beautiful. Yeah, 100%. I agree with you that it's a great example for what a coach is, and especially like at the highest level in terms of the club game, what it could be because unfortunately, like he's kind of rare because unfortunately people don't get that time, right?
Yeah.
And so where when we talk about how what determines good coaching and how people critique some of these coaches, I often will tell people we don't give the coaches enough grace, right? Even in the era of social media where armchair analysis is just rife and can be all over the place, we don't give the players enough grace sometimes as well. But certainly with coaches, we don't give them enough grace because how many fans or people, just casual observers, will say, "Oh, the coach should have done this, they should have done that," as if it's somewhat easy to do.
Yeah. Just
They
move
might be
that
right.
pace and that solves your
Yeah,
problems.
and
Yeah.
they might even be right. I'm not saying that they're ignorant. It's just point is like if you're not in it and you're not dealing with all the different kinds of stresses that these men and women are under who are coaching these top programs or nations, it's it's a difficult thing. It's a difficult thing, especially when your mandate is you got to win.
Mm-hmm.
You could be out in 2, 3 years, right? Like you think
Or
about it.
less. Yeah.
How many coaches are getting 3 years at a club? To at a period where they might struggle and then okay we're gonna it's not happening, it's not happening. And so when we start
Mm-hmm.
critiquing what coaches are or not doing or how good they are, that has to be placed in its proper context of they're under this pressure, and at the end of the day it comes back to capitalism, of course, right? This pressure to win and reap profits and keep
Mm-hmm.
things moving and pushing and keep butts in seats. Like I get it, but these are human beings and it's a very difficult job, right? It's a very, very difficult job.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, I don't know. Anything else that you want to touch on with that, or like,
Oh, it's spot on. It's spot on. So, like you said, a coach like Simeone, he's been at Atletico, I believe, since 2011. That's a testament to what he's been able to do in terms of connection with his players, with the club, and with the city, with the people. Because when you watch a game, you can feel that the players are 100% behind him, that the crowd's 100% behind him. Doesn't mean that he's perfect. No, they have ups and downs just like anybody else. But yeah, if you can inspire that kind of belief, that's I think what it means to be a good or great coach. I think to inspire that level of belief and commitment from the people around you.
yeah, and it comes out in the players, right? Because they embody. So, well, they have to be, the intelligence has to be on the field, and they basically take ownership of that process, right? And
Mhm.
that's what's so beautiful about this sport. I love this sport for that reason, is that,
Yeah.
we as coaches, of course, we have an influence. Of course, it'd be crazy to say we don't. Within the actual game, the influence maybe is not as much as people might think, right? Because you got to think about it,
Mhm.
playing in front of 60,000, 70,000 people. How many the athletic players can't hear him? The far side winger is not going to be able to hear him no matter how hard he yells. So they've already got to be encoded with an idea and a way of being within this space and a way of sharing the responsibility uh, that this invasion sport asks of the players. Um, so that process is like one of, for us as coaches, it's one of helping a group with a collective idea and them owning it enough where you can remove yourself, right?
Mhm.
Because you have to remove yourself because you're not playing.
Yeah.
And you don't have all these timeouts to sort of move people into position. Like the nature of the game is such that it's so fluid. So, which gets us into some really interesting discussions that I'm sure we'll have maybe later as well in different episodes about different styles of play and what those mean, right? Like, maybe we have like we can touch upon it now if you want, like in terms of, and because I was just talking to a buddy yesterday about this, like there's one train of thought that people have and a critique they have about certain coaches, right? Like Pep, or even Simeone, or coaches who are like more positional and more quote unquote restrictive of their players, and other coaches who allow for more freedom of expression. I'm
Mhm.
using loosely divided, or more apositional play, let's call it that way, or the fancy term now, or the common term is relationism, right?
Mhm.
Relation. So anyway, what are you just your thoughts on that? And you've heard these discussions, right? I think we've bounced around a couple ideas. What's
Mhm.
your take on that as it relates to this idea of quality coaching?
Yeah, we have talked about it quite a bit, and the consensus is just the fact that each coach is going to do what they feel is best for their group. And also, coaches are going to do what they feel works with the tools that they have, right? So there are some coaches who are going to maybe struggle for a season or two because they really want to implement their idea. That's something we're seeing with United right now, right? We see a coach who really wants to implement his system of play, and so maybe the team is struggling. You have other coaches who they can afford to, for many reasons, like for example Pep right now, he can afford to continue to play and sometimes struggle and not get the results he wants because he has had the success that he's had in the last decade or so. So for me, it really depends. Each coach's situation is so different, and that goes back to the understanding of the greater context. Every situation is unique. Again, there are some coaches that have a shorter leash. There's some coaches that have a longer leash. If you're, a coach that's been winning for many, many years in a certain club, you're probably going to have a longer leash. If you're new and if you've been bouncing around, you may not be given that time and that grace to even implement your full ideas, right? So it really just depends on who you are and where you are. So.
Yeah, I that's a no, it's worth thinking about when it comes to like teaching, right? Guiding others, how much stress somebody's under when it's a results based industry. And the results in this sport often can be down to a lot more luck than people will think about actually, or actually accept, right? Like
Mm,
football, like, I'll give you an example of what I'm saying. Like, you know how the French team won the World Cup in 1998, and then they won the Euros in 2000, right? They did that double. And Zidane, Desailly, Deschamps, that team. Okay. Do you know how close the Netherlands were to winning both of those tournaments?
Weren't they in the semifinals of both?
The Dutch team in 1998, so that was the team of Dennis Bergkamp, Mark Overmars, that team,
Davids.
Kluivert, that
Yeah.
team, baller team. In 1998 in France, they played Brazil in the semifinal, and I believe the game went to PKs, right? So they were right there with Brazil. So they could have been in the final of that. I'm pretty sure it went to PKs. I'm happy to be corrected on that. But the point is, it was a tight game. It was just a tight game. Could have gone either way. Okay. Yeah, I did go to PKs. I remember it because now I have an image in my mind of Taffarel saving a shot to win it. Yeah.
I
So
have the
the reason,
replays. I didn't watch it obviously live.
yeah,
So
this is before your time.
yeah.
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 But anyway, for those of you who don't know, there's 9 years difference between Mumbi and I. So, but anyway, but you remember 2000 a little bit, right?
That was the first tournament I started like,
That was
oh,
a,
I
that was a
can kind
baller
of
tournament.
remember. Yeah.
Oh my God, that was an amazing tournament. But so the Dutch lose in the semifinal against Brazil. Okay, in World Cup. In 2000, they co-host that tournament, right? With Belgium, right? So Netherlands and Belgium co-hosted it, and they get to the semifinal, and they play Italy. I'm telling you, that game sums up how cruel this sport is. Holland missed the PK. The Dutch missed the PK in regulation time. They had chance after chance. Like they balled out. Italy, not saying they were bad, but Italy in that entire tournament this was Catenaccio. This was Italy in their heyday of like, we're being really good defensive solidly, and then we have some geniuses that can unlock on the counter, or yeah, we can get the ball and be good with it, but we're okay if we don't have it. Because that team had up and maybe not up and coming, it's unfair to say up and coming, but like a young Francesco Totti, right? He wore the number 20 that tournament. He was baller. And they had some other guys, like their goalkeeper stood on his head. Toldo was the goalkeeper. They had Nesta, Maldini. Like, this was Italy, right? Defended for their lives. They played the game at the Amsterdam Arena, or now the Johan Cruyff Arena. And it was like a sea of orange with just a little patch of blue. And so these dudes were literally like fighting for their lives. They took it to extra time. They took it to PKs, right? Holland loses in PKs in their own tournament. And they were very good. So my point is, Holland was probably the second, maybe even the best team in that tournament. And they win it. And of course, we know what happened in the final of Euro 2000, French against the Italians. Italy, again, they scored first, Italy, and they actually, I remember watching that game with a close friend of mine, like Perot, Steve, we watched that game together, and like, yeah, Italy easily could have won that game, but France, they got back into it, scored late to take it to extra time, and then in stoppage time, they scored the golden goal, and they won the tournament. And you could say, okay, they were the best team overall, but Italy was right there. The Dutch certainly were right there, right? A Holland-France final would have been epic. It would have been an unbelievable game. And it wouldn't have surprised me at all if the Dutch had won it. But this is what I mean by history doesn't remember the Dutch team.
Maybe fairly. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. You don't remember that, like, yo, these dudes were literally PKs away from doing that double.
Yeah.
Right? And this is what I mean. So now back to that was a long-winded caveat. Sorry, but like, when we're judging coaches and we're judging quality, like, you see what I mean? Like,
You'd have to, yeah, you'd have to step outside of the paradigm of just winning and losing, because I think that's the
Thank
easiest
you.
thing to
Absolutely.
recognize across sports is this player lost or this team lost, and this team won, and it's so
Absolutely.
easy to have that conversation. It's the first thing on the front page, or it's the first thing that you'll see on Sports Center or on Sky Sports, is like who won and who lost. That's the first thing they talk about, and then now they'll start to dissect things. But very rarely will you appreciate the quality of a way a team played if that team ends up losing. Right. Very rarely is that something that people are able to do. And it's hard. I get it, especially if you're a fan, though, right? Because if you're a fan,
Of
right,
course.
at the end of the day, you don't care what it looks like. You just
Well,
want
it's a
your team.
subjective. It's a subjective
Yeah, yeah,
lens,
yeah,
right? Subjective bias.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think that might be a good way to wrap up because what you said there about is it's difficult to sort of think outside the results. Uh, we're gonna on this show time and time again try to be as objective as possible in terms of dissecting some of these topics, right? Because it goes beyond yours or I's subjective interpretation and our bias, right? And it's
Yeah.
about like doing justice to, first of all, who are we serving and what is going on here? Our analysis has to go deeper than just I think, I feel, what is actually going on. And I think,
Mm.
yeah, this is a cool way to start off this in terms of what is quality and all the things that go into it. But I look forward to diving deeper into so many different things with you. Um, yeah, man. Tell the people where they can find you and what you're up to and yeah, how to follow your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So on Instagram, that's where I post a lot of the information for my training program. It's called Elevate Training Program, and it's at Elevate underscore training underscore program. And that's where I kind of post updates about the programs that I run. That's where I also post updates about my coaching situation right now. I'm with Ballistic United in Pleasanton, California, and I'm excited to continue doing good work with them over the next couple of years, hopefully.
Love it, bro. Love it. And you guys can find me at my Twitter handle, I guess, at the rising point one, the digit one. Of course, all this will be in the show description as well. And then the website, therisingpoint.com, the work that I do there. And if you're in Seattle, the Seattle area during the summer, it's going to be an awesome summer for USL2 soccer action. I'm one of the assistants for Ballard FC. So that's how I spend a lot of my time. And Washington Youth Soccer as well. Got to shout them out. But listen, Mumbi, this was awesome. So glad that we're jumping on this and doing it. That's about our time now. We're gonna try to keep our shows to about a half of football, right? 45 minutes. And this is stoppage time now that we're in, which is perfect. But dude, this is gonna be a lot of fun. Players, youth players anywhere, look out for these shows. We will send stuff out, and we want your input on what we're going to be discussing. Because again, the focus is on you, the youth player, your experiences, youth player, and also if you're a collegiate player or even a pro player, and you want to dive into stuff, like we're going to get into some pretty awesome discussions and have some awesome guests. We have we've talked about one of the first the people that we have lined up to come on, and I'm so excited for that. But yeah, man, appreciate you all. Welcome to the Impact Space. We'll see you next time.